Hello everyone, welcome back to the Rugby Bunker podcast. We're in our own homes, not on location, which feels very weird. We haven't done this for ages. How are you?
I'm very well. Just about to be on the road as you are, which kind of gives you a snapshot of our autumns. They're manic, but our hearts are full. We're busy. What's not to love?
I mean, proper divide and conquer situation, because I'm going to go see the All Blacks. The beauty of editing, Charlie, is that I can now cut in some B-roll of All Blacks training. You won't see any training, but you will see Maro Toje, I'm guessing, and a coach.
That's right. Yeah, TBC. But yeah, Maro normally does a sort of the tone setter on the Thursday now. That tends to be the kind of routine, and Steve Borthwick will explain his team, whether that's on the Thursday or on the Tuesday. Obviously this week we've already had it. We've had it early, and New Zealand have announced their side a couple of hours before we record. So you'll be hearing all about that. And that's the song and dance we get these days, right? There seems to be a psychological edge that coaches are trying to get, even in the team announcement and even in the ordering of the 20s, which we're going to get into. That's a fascinating kind of aspect of how this one's going to play out.
My apologies, listeners / viewers, if you hear a hedge trimmer going in the background. I swear, the second we pressed record and said, let's start, it started. Bear with me. Charlie, into that All Blacks team, I think we should start there this week, if I just pull up key kind of notes from it. So Steve Borthwick was interesting on Tuesday when I was at Penny Hill Park, because he sort of tried to predict that New Zealand would go with Damien McKenzie and Beauden Barrett in their starting 15 based on his belief about their kicking. We'll get into that more, into the tactics side of it. But for now, McKenzie's kept on the bench. It's actually a loaded bench, isn't it? Talk to me about the threats that they have there with Wallace Tatiti and the other players there.
The starting point for me is the front row, given how they've managed to turn the screw set piece wise on England in the last 3 times they played against each other, all in 2024. Tokiaho, Williams and Tossi together are formidable. You know, not just they have that real ballast set piece wise. They are phenomenal carriers, all of them. They've got serious heft to lend to that gain line. I was at All Blacks training on Tuesday, and Jason Ryan had the 2 front rows as units kind of scrummaging against one another. And, you know, that was the kind of the signpost that's going to carry on being their sort of strategy of switching and switching out. And interestingly, England sort of preempted that by having what was their sort of strongest, you'd probably say, front row of the Lions tourist. The initial Lions tourist, Jamie George, joined up late, didn't he? But Genge, Cowan-Dickie and Stewart on the bench, with Hayes, Baxter and George starting. Josh Lord drops down to that bench after a pretty assured test match at Murrayfield. The big one for me is, the big 2, I would say. Tatiti, you're right to say, I think he's just box office. Such a good player. Comfortable on the balls, incredibly good as a link guy. I was sort of reviewing his offload for Mark Talaya's try in the first 10 minutes at Twickenham a year ago. That he's so strong at standing tall, and those skills that look instinctive. We actually got a glimpse of them practicing offloads, but that just goes to show that those are skills that are practice and practice and practice. And so when in these game-breaking moments that can be worth 5 and 7 points, they come up trumps. You know, that's an absolute hallmark of their game, and his game in particular. And Damien McKenzie, he's just become a gradually more important, more influential figure for the All Blacks, hasn't he? And that kind of came to a head at Murrayfield when he just seized control of that, the sort of final quarter of that test match, when all the momentum seems to be going Scotland's way. So many big touches, the long range penalty, the try, ludicrous finish, 50-22. He's somebody that seems to be really thriving in those situations, and thriving in his role of elevating a team from the bench, not unlike a few of the England guys are. So I would say Tom Curry dropping to the bench is a similar sort of strategy, isn't it? Whereby this guy could, in a run, if you were going old school and you're picking starters to go as long as they could, Tom Curry would be starting for England. But actually, it's 2 coaches really identifying the final 20 minutes as the winning and the losing of the game, and making sure they're finishing with a seriously stacked team.
Yeah, the reason Josh Lord is back on the bench, just to go back to that, is because Scott Barrett is back, and obviously that's massive in terms of leadership, in terms of the All Blacks line out. Was it Tosi last year who absolutely got into Finn Baxter for that final scrum towards the end? Am I right in recalling that correctly? The way the All Blacks turned the game there so impressively late on. And it's interesting now that England have sort of flipped around to counter that. I guess the other selection to note with the All Blacks is that Leicester Fainga'anuku's moved back to the wing after they tried him against 13 against Scotland, and it kind of worked, kind of didn't. Defensively, it definitely didn't work. Missed 7 tackles, which was by far and away the most out of any player in that game. And so I think by moving him back to the wing, I think he's better there. They kind of like him in like that roaming attacking role, don't they, off his wing, to create mismatches and to be the extra man. And I think he's probably better at that. And so you get Billy Proctor in to partner Quinn Tupaea at centre. Interesting that there's been no Rico Ioane on this tour at all. He is available, but they've decided to go with Proctor at 13. I think Caleb Clark out. We're going to get into this in the tactics bit. Liam said on Monday when we had a chat, Liam Napier of the New Zealand Herald, Clark out is huge because Clark is their best player, in his opinion, under the high ball. And actually, under the high ball in general, New Zealand have really struggled there. That was kind of South Africa's template earlier this year in Wellington in terms of getting height on the balls. That does feel like we've spoken about to be an area where England can go after this All Black side.
No doubt. Yeah. That's 100% happening. It's the aerial battle is so interesting because England haven't had it all their own way, certainly receiving high balls. That's been, Freddie Stewart was put under real pressure by Harry Potter at Twickenham, as we sort of noted in the post-match stuff from there. What Caleb Clark certainly gives you, and I think this is honed, just thinking back, sort of thinking aloud really, I think it's probably honed by his time in sevens. He was used as a really aggressive chaser of restarts, wasn't he? And we know how big an area that is of the game. I'm sure the guys, the guys that New Zealand have picked on the wing, Carter and Fainga'anuku, will be aggressive, as whether they can be as prolific as causing trouble there. Because if England are allowed to settle and play the rhythm they want, if they're allowed to exit their own half pretty without too much, quite accurately, and I think that they can build their way into the game, and they'll want it to be tight, to have a little lead by the time they unload that bench. Because the other kind of trend, and it was a remarkable trend really, of the 3 games that New Zealand played against England in 2024 was that England didn't score a single point in any of the 3 games after the 59th minute, I think. So that's an hour of rugby in the final quarter where they haven't managed to turn the screw, and they had the lead in each of those, and then they subsided. Steve Borthwick certainly ordered a 23 to do that, and it feels like Scott Robertson is somebody that has known the value of that, and is therefore sort of ordered his 23 accordingly too. The Geordie Barrett, if we're talking about a kicking game, that is a big miss for New Zealand. And yeah, you're right. It makes sense that it's easy to see how England thought that they would try and get Mackenzie and Bowden Barrett in the same 15 to make up that kicking variety across the back line, because they've probably now got a fair bit, well, they do now have a fair bit less variety. They've got Roygaard, who has a serious boot on him, and Bowden Barrett, who has a lot of variety. I will be interested to see who Mackenzie comes on for and whether they finish up with that variety across the backline kicking wise, because that's just 100% going to be a big part of it.
Charlie, if we roll out the kind of tactics board for the week. So on the kicking front, Steve Borthwick on Tuesday stressing how much the All Blacks have kicked in recent games against England. And so because we're diligent journalists, Charlie, we've dug into the numbers, and we have 2 sets of numbers that I think are interesting. So I'll flash up first a set of numbers from the 3 tests that England played against New Zealand last year, and we'll just go through those quickly. Borthwick basically said, if I pull up the exact quote, because I don't want to misquote him, what's been really clear is that New Zealand, when they've played against England in the last 3 games, have kicked the ball a lot. Every game it has spiked how much they have kicked. Last year it took them, they came in that, and the first thing they did is go, right, we are kicking this ball. And then he sort of wondered out loud, I wonder if they're going to go with Bowden Barrett and Damien McKenzie. They didn't. And then also when Scott Robinson said on Monday, look, we're in the Northern Hemisphere, like, you're going to expect kicking, Borthwick kind of pushed back, and he said, look, once you go back and see how many times New Zealand kicked last year, you'll get a clear picture of how Scott Robinson wants his team to play. So the numbers from last year, because I found this quite interesting. So they played each other 3 times, Dunedin, Auckland, Twickenham. First game, I think I'll go through the number of kicks first and then kick to pass ratio, because kick to pass ratio is sneaky important in this. The number of kicks per test. In the first test, New Zealand 35, England 31. In Auckland, it was New Zealand 36, England 29. And then at Twickenham, England actually kicked 3 times more, 33-30. But the kick-pass ratio is interesting. In Dunedin, New Zealand had a kick for every 6.1 passes compared to England's 3.6. In Auckland, it flipped. It was 1 kick for every 3.4 passes for New Zealand to 1 every 4.8 for England, so England more. And then finally at Twickenham, New Zealand's kick-to-pass ratio, and this fascinated me, 1 kick for every 7 passes compared to 3.2 for England for every kick. So your total was New Zealand kicked 101 times to England's 93 over those 3 games, and their kick-pass ratio was 5.5 compared to 3.9. What do you take out of that when you see that?
I think it suggests that New Zealand have just adapted to what England have thrown at them, which is the sort of, if you remember back to that test series, I think England had a real problem launching from lineouts. They gaffed a lot of stuff off first phase. They didn't look particularly comfortable, and they missed a lot of chances in that series. They really did. That's why I think the really fascinated to speak to Itoje later, because I feel like the mood in the England sort of setup has to be, look, we've had 3 sighters at these guys, and we've come up short each time by a score, by a couple of points here and there. And I think they just had trouble, although they were close certainly in those 2 games in New Zealand, they just had trouble sort of connecting their kicking game with being clinical in the opposition 22, which is maybe part of the reason that those ratios are down pass-wise, because stuff was breaking down before they could get any fluency. Now, we know with kicking that crowds can get frustrated with it, but we also know that crowds get amnesia with it, amnesia about it, if kicking is married to a really fluent sort of passing game, a really clinical attack off the back of it. And this is to borrow a sort of truism that our colleague Chris Jones said, that there's some games at Twickenham where the crowd really gets on the back of England about the style, but there's other games where the result is all that matters, and that there's an appreciation that, right, if England are going to go and go and go to this kicking game, as they will, you would expect, with George Ford playing, with Tom Roebuck on the wings, with Freddie Stewart at the back, if they're going to stick in this kicking battle and make it their key path to victory, then I think the crowd will be with them in doing it. Because over the course of this year, so this is really interesting. And I think, so just to answer your question in a really sort of, in a far sharper way, I think New Zealand's kicking numbers are based on how they've reacted to how England have tried to impose themselves. Because they've had to kick, because England have kicked to them and tried to impose that way. Because across the course of this year, they obviously haven't played each other this year, England and New Zealand, but England are averaging 35 kicks in play per game. New Zealand are averaging 25. The last game in Scotland, New Zealand only kicked 17 times. That's not very much at all. And so one of the moments that sticks out for me from that game is they went 7-0 up, and they had a scrum in their own 22 or close by to their own 22, and they played out to the right. They came back to the left. Satiti got on the ball with an offload, I think, certainly someone close to the left touch line, and they were happy keeping the ball. And some of their best stuff this year, I think, has been the really flowing coast to coast stuff, and they've shown that they can pick off aggressive defensive, and I think they will come at England with that. England are kicking markedly more in games when they're not playing the All Blacks. Interestingly, the last 2 tests for England this autumn have been the only tests this year when they've gone under 30 kicks per game. So 26 against Australia, 27 against Fiji. They have had games where they've been past 40. So 46 against France at home, 41 against Argentina in the first test away, 40 against them in the second test. Certainly when they're all in on this kicking game, they will not get bored of it. Certainly seems to be that's going to be the case on Saturday.
I was going to ask you what their highest number is this year. So it is 46 against France. I could easily see England clearing that on Saturday. But to your point earlier, all it needs is for a couple of box kicks to go up, and for Roebuck or Faye Weboso to win it back in the air, or for Faianga or Leroy Carter or Will Jordan to bomb a couple and knock it on, to then get the crowd on side and for them to sort of appreciate the strategy. I think while England have spoken about wanting to play kind of like this fast-paced game with width. It's horses for courses, isn't it? And I think realistically, they appreciate that is not the correct approach. Touched on the bench earlier. This kind of reversion to the tactic that worked against Australia. We still haven't come up with a name for it, and I think that's fine. This kind of English version of a bomb squad. I feel like all options are still open.
Not having bomb squad
just feels a bit lazy. Like, are we?
Yeah.
Can we not get to a better place there?
Hey, we're not. It's not going anywhere anytime soon. They are going to trial the 7-1 in the.
Okay, well, listen. It's an open challenge for our comment section, which we've seen you've been getting live here on our videos in recent weeks. Come up with a decent name for England's replacements for us, because there clearly is a plan to copy South Africa. Borthwick mentioned a couple of times on Tuesday how much he likes the idea of bringing them all on, like en masse. And he said, one of the first things he said actually on Tuesday was that he wants this massive roar. He wants to hear like a huge roar from the crowd when everyone sees Genge and Stewart and Cowan Dickey and Pollock and Curry all lined up to come on, and Cunningham himself. Sorry, I knew I'd forgotten a sub. That he wants that kind of crowd lift, momentum lift. It's interesting. It's not viewed anymore as just like a momentum lift on the field. It's viewed as sort of a total kind of weapon that you can use to get the crowd involved as well. I mean, what the game has changed, Charlie.
I think it's a way of definitively splitting up a game. And that sounds really obvious, but they've done it, and it's not. I know they talk about Q4 and the last 20 minutes and whatever, but I think the main sort of separation point is 50 minutes, and that's been when it's been around 50 minutes when they didn't bring on Itoje with that group, did they? So I think they brought on 4 together against Fiji and 5 together against Australia. But in those, we've mentioned before, they were 17-0 up against 15-0 up. They won the last half hour. So since that sort of big influx of replacements, they've won both of those in the first 2 tests of this autumn by 3 tries to 0. They haven't conceded. Lucky not to concede with the Kuravoli non-try against Fiji, but nonetheless, they are 3 tries to none with that. And that's they're tangibly looking at how they've finished games against sides, including the All Blacks last year, and gone, well, that's a way to fix it. And not to forget Marcus Smith on there as well. Ben Spencer too. Marcus Smith's versatility has got him there over Finn Smith, you would say. Maybe also that bit of spark, because he's had good games generally against the All Blacks. He had a tricky time off the tee in Dunedin, I think. But otherwise, his running threat is something else to throw into that mix. Where the worry is, for me, and we could call it a gamble, we can call it whatever you want, because Steve Borthwick will have had contingencies, will have drilled contingencies, but an injury to one of the centres or one of the wings makes it really tricky.
Yeah, it's where we get funky. It's where we start seeing all this stuff that England have been training with Earl and Pepper and Pollock, right? Are you not?
Yeah.
Are you not sneaky like me, intrigued? Like, part of me just wants to see it for a prolonged period.
Hugely. I'm really intrigued. I'm really interested that now Finn Smith, the way I've sort of rationalized it in my head is Finn Smith is not only sort of fighting for a place on a 62 bench, and to show he's going to have to show that he can cover 12 to be more of a option on those 62 benches, but he's also going to have to show that he's bringing more value than one of the other back rowers, because that's why England have got to this point, is because these back rowers are so valuable to them. If someone like Earl is a live option at 12. If you speak to, I'm not sure this has ever come across on TV, but and please forgive me if it has, listeners, viewers, but when he's in press huddles about Earl and you'd ask him about 12, he's basically disgusted with the question. He's basically saying, yes, I can do this. Like this is honestly fine. And in fairness, he's grown up as somebody that flits between midfield and the back row. Just generally, that's been his upbringing. He sort of would move, I think, in school games and maybe even higher up between those 2 positions. But he really doesn't see the fuss, and I don't think he would. But it's hard, and it is difficult. And it worked against Wales. England came on strong in that game. On the Argentina tour, they finished with 5 back rowers with Alex Dombrandt sort of covering the back line. So, they see that their sort of depth of back rowers as an asset that can sort of usurp traditional conventional wisdom. But I just feel my nagging, what I can't get out of my head with this game, and why I think I'm edging towards New Zealand is just how New Zealand will be able to test them laterally. They'll have a lot of, their ball movement has looked good. They have a lot of speed. They have a lot of dynamism, as they always do. And I just wonder how England can consistently combat that. To combat that, their back row will have to go off and be absolutely awesome, which is quite possible.
Quite funny that we wondered who was going to be England's like long-term centres for 10 years. And actually it's just a load of back rowers because they're so stacked with back rowers that they thought, actually, let's stick the back rowers there. Before we chat about the other games, anything else tactically that sort of excites you and intrigues you about this going into it?
Just how connected England's attack can be. I think they really want, this is only a hunch, I think they really want Elliot Daly to be part of their plans going forward. Clearly his award of an EPS, an enhanced EPS contract suggests that they really want that distributing back three player, whether that's from the wing or fullback to link attacks. They don't really have that in this game. So it will be interesting to see how they capitalise on, whether it gets sticky in the New Zealand 22 and whether New Zealand can absorb pressure there, whether how clinical England can be as far as turning pressure into points. Wouldn't be surprised at all to see a few drop goal attempts from George Ford. And yeah, the other thing is just they've been cycling through sort of line out strikes from 4-man line outs with very sort of, looks very Northampton Saints, but Northampton Saints just do it sort of in a more pronounced kind of smoother way than most other teams, but sort of using Alex Mitchell's deception at the base to sort of, he'll bolt to a rut, look one way, go the other. And they're just trying to catch sort of defenders folding and overfolding. So how penetrative England can be in the first three phases of their attack, I think is really, really interesting. And how they've spoken about it explicitly, haven't they? How they turn those line breaks into tries, into points, because that's a for all of the chat that New Zealand are in a transition sort of stage, they're still really good at that. They can still strike, go 7, 14, 21, and that's going to be a hell of a battle.
Yeah, I guess I'd just add to that, while it's been fun seeing England's bench bail them out the last 2 weeks, maybe start better, maybe go into half-time with 20 points on the board and finish off some of those line breaks. They're due. So maybe this is the week. But yeah, it would be good to see England not necessarily digging themselves out of a hole for this one and building a commanding lead. But we'll see. We'll see, Charlie. Let's take a little break. Let's dig into the games of the weekend. Right, Charlie, lots of other juicy little games for us to have a talk about. Can we start with Wales against Japan? Not only because Wales' entire autumn seems to rest on this fixture, but also because you were there in Cardiff last Sunday and you got a glimpse of Wales up close against Argentina. 2 changes to their team, which really interest me. Ollie Cracknell getting a first test start at number 8, and obviously Lewis Rees-Zammit is back on the wing. So yeah, what did you make of Wales last week?
Do you know what, they were certainly competent in good patches, and I think what Steve Tandy said afterwards was really accurate, that it was a reflection of how they'd coached in attack, as how they'd trained in attack, and the plans that they were able to put plans across, which was heartening in some respects. I think it was a really reality check. Reality check suggests that there are expectations around this team. I don't think there are high expectations at all, but the sort of, I guess it was maybe on the side of galling that they can play well for long periods and still ship 50 to an Argentina side that frankly didn't have some of their very best players. It was a good Argentina performance, I thought. They didn't invite too much pressure on themselves, but they went after Wales in the air, got a lot of pay, got those fractured situations, and were just fantastic in those. And they were allowed to feed they were at back five. The athletes they've got in their back five and the athletes they have out wide were able to sort of really impose themselves on the game. And that's dangerous. That's dangerous for anyone against Argentina, let alone a Wales side that's finding its way with a lot of players with new caps. But I think generally it's probably on the side of slightly more optimistic, but also it just reinforced how far they've got to go. And this Japan game, I did write at the time that it feels important, this game. It's over 830 days since Wales last won a game at home, and that was that weird.
What?
Yeah. Mad, right? And in that time they've been absolutely pumped by England, absolutely pumped now by Argentina. I feel also that these last 2 games of the autumn are looming large. because they could be anything. It feels like if it unravels, then again, there were moments against Argentina when it threatened to unravel. Argentina scored 2 tries in the first 10 minutes, then had a penalty to kick to the corner, which they missed. And, if they've gone 19, 20 or 21-0 up there, that's real panic stations and things can really spiral. So that it was impressive, as Tandy said. And when they went down to a second yellow card later on, that they problem solved a bit and showed a bit of guts. Revamping that back row, losing Jack Morgan would be a blow to just about any Test team in the world. He was phenomenal in that game as well against Argentina. But yeah, they've got to win that game. It's interesting that they've gone with Ollie Cracknell, who's a bopper, just tough, really tough, and he's been a joy to watch for Leicester Tigers, to be honest. He's got a lot about him. But Mann and Wainwright elsewhere in the back row, that's interesting, because Japan are gonna try and play as fast as they absolutely can. So it's gonna be a little bit of a sort of clash of approaches. And but getting over the line for Wales just feels so important, however they do it.
When you say anything for those last two, what are we talking, like 80s, like 90s, like really?
Well, Argentina were missing some of their best players, and scored 50, and didn't have it their own way. They conceded 4 tries. Wales scored 4 tries themselves. So I think it would depend what sort of side the Springboks put out in that game. But it's out of the window as well, so Wales will have
So surely they won't go heavy. I mean, they'll be missing some anyway, but surely they're not going full.
Wales will be really compromised. Those 2 guys coming in, Ollie Cracknell won't be available.
Good.
Daunting. Thomas Williams won't be available.
Great. Yeah.
It's just a Max Llewellyn, pretty good against Argentina.
Brilliant. Yeah.
It feels like something that's hanging over their head. And maybe I'm wrong, and Steve Tandy, don't get me wrong, is making noises to suggest that A, he's in it for the long haul, and B, his expectation, he's very realistic about the progression of this team. It just needs to have enough encouraging aspects so that apathy doesn't kind of really take hold, I think.
Yeah, they have to win. Italy, South Africa, Charlie. I didn't really get a chance to talk much about the box on Tuesday's episode. I did want to try and get somebody on, but we ran out of time. Just so impressive in Paris. They are standard above everybody else. Nobody else has the kind of ability at the moment to use their bench that effectively, and I think to ride out that red card the way they did, in the manner they did, the kind of bold calls by Erasmus. Look, how could you not have come away just full of admiration for it? I hope that was the case for anyone who was critical of the Springboks at any point this year. I was just so impressed. In terms of this week, expecting a lot of rotation against Italy. I think Erasmus basically said that he wants to have Ethan Hooker and Kane Moody in his midfield, which is good. I think it's a good opportunity for them to try some new combinations. Not that this is going to be easy by any means, because I think we saw kind of the best of Italy against Australia in that the flair was there with some nice tries by Louis Liner and Monty Ioane, but actually the control was there. Like, the kicking game was good. Tackled 206 times. To Australia's 97, like that kind of defensive discipline, and with a really high tackle success rate in the 90s as well. Like, the kind of core building blocks are there. I think, you'd probably see from a South African perspective a new back row, and maybe a bit of Andre Pollard. A lot of changes essentially, but that will then keep them fresh heading into that Ireland game next week.
Yeah, this is where you see the real virtuous circle of what the Boks are doing, right? You see the guys coming in who are young and want to seize this opportunity to break into the gun 23, but they're also being prepared by the veterans that know how important the high standards in preparation are. It's what England are working towards, but it's what South Africa have been living for a while now. And I just think it's really interesting that the pertinent question is now, who's going to stop them getting a third World Cup back to back? And what a place to be. What a place to be that is. I think it will be informative if they're really, really clinical and impressive in games like this, when there is danger of an emotional spike and a little emotional, whatever the opposite of a spike is, emotional trough. And there's the potential to have one eye on Ireland next week. If they're good in these games, it really just shows how healthy the situation is.
Yeah, is it essentially South Africa versus Father Time / succession planning? Right? That's kind of what it. That's a little bit what it feels like, given the gap between them and everybody else at the moment. Ireland, Australia, the Wallabies just look cooked. They just look like this schedule is taken out of them, and they are so far off the highs of winning that third test against the Lions and winning at Ellis Park that I love. Test rugby's great, isn't it? I love that the Wallabies won at Ellis Park and then lost to Italy last week, and now you get Italy, South Africa, just like the cycle of like everything kind of coming full circle. I think it's brilliant. And no Will Skelton because he got injured playing for La Rochelle. So great.
The saving grace for the Wallabies and somebody that Lenny Katau will be back. That's huge, and because he just elevates everything that goes on around that the sort of punchy phase play close to the ruck that they sort of use to eke out impetus and get a few quick rucks back to back. He's phenomenal as part of that, whether he's picking and going, whether he's one out. So that's their route into the game. But then again, Ireland themselves, they were certainly pretty stodgy for the first half of the Japan game. So it's two sides. This is why these windows are great, because this game, the England-New Zealand game, Wales-Japan, and the one we're going to talk about last, Scotland-Argentina, the jeopardy for the losers, when these test matches are isolated, when there's such a big build-up, when there's so much tension at play, the jeopardy is like soul-searching. You're soul-searching if you don't get over the line. And the losers for a few of these games this week, all of those ones I mentioned, will be doing that.
Yeah, I think the buzzwords from that Japan game were laboured and patchy, and I liked Andy Farrell's post-match question, which was, did you get the response you wanted after losing in Chicago? And he just went, in short, no. So that's good. Do you want to win a line out, Ireland? Have we thought about fixing this like glaring area of your game, which used to be kind of a part of their system, which we respected really highly? Like, what's going on there? Honestly, just alarming stuff. This would be potentially a good get-right game for their set piece ahead of a game next week against the Box, where you are really, really going to need your set piece. Yeah, I think if they struggle again there this week against the Wallabies, then questions are going to be asked, which leaves us, Charlie, with Scotland-Argentina. And in my notes, I've just put, don't sleep on it, because I think actually it could be really, really fun on Sunday. I think it may end up being kind of game of the weekend. While I filibuster and just check the last Scotland-Argentina score, because I remember it being quite sizable, and I can't remember off the top of my head what it was. 52-29. That was it.
The last time. That was the last time they played each other.
It was November 2022, because I remembered Argentina going there and shipping a ton of points, but I just couldn't remember how many it was. 52-29 3 years ago. I don't know if Scotland will get up to 52 again. I have noted from afar the kind of trauma at failing to beat the All Blacks again in the manner that they did, because how often are you going to get 3 All Blacks yellow cards in one game? You're going to have Darcy Graham with such a great opportunity. I mean, it's amazing defence from Cam Roigard, but still, what an opportunity to score. And then Mackenzie just defying physics up the other end, somehow like stopping his body to score. Like I think that's gonna hurt Scotland for a long time, and I wonder how much of that bleeds into this week against Argentina.
I think that was the very first thing. I don't know whether he did press on Monday or this was sort of some of the stuff that was held over from the weekend, but Gregor Townsend had to move to insist that there wouldn't be an emotional hangover from the New Zealand game. It's one thing saying that. It would be really impressive if there wasn't. It would really, really be impressive if there wasn't, because you could see how, and as Sione Tuipulotu said afterwards, there was so much that went into the plan to beat the All Blacks. We're talking about the order of the 23, sort of big decisions. I thought they got big selection decisions. I thought they got a lot of that right. Carl Steyn was a factor in the air. The bench they've got in Jamie Dobie and Tom Jordan, they've got 2 players who are perfect for a 6-2 bench, and that came on at the right time. That looked like it had potential to sort of bring the game away from New Zealand, and then Damien McKenzie rocked up. So it's hard, and Tuipulotu admirably didn't shy away from that. Did he gave a really good post-match interview where you could see the pain of that. And Argentina, I just always feel like they've turned up. They've absolutely pumped Wales. I think they'll really give it a crack. I think they'll give this a real go, and I'm really looking forward to it.
The theory I've had in my head all autumn is that Argentina will get to Allianz Stadium next Sunday and just be a little bit cooked. And the more I look at them, the less I think that. I think there's so much to like about that team. Love Carl Steyn. It's just so reliable. If Scotland lost this, you have such a weird autumn, because then you would have thrashed the USA and gained nothing apart from that lovely assist from Liam McConnell. And I'm going to just check that.
For Duan's.
For Duan, yeah. Is that right? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I thought that was unbelievable. And then you'll have lost to the All Blacks again. Nightmare. If you lose to Argentina, it's not great, especially given that you can see why it might happen with what happened against the All Blacks, but still not great. And then you play Tonga, I think, in the last week, which you're expected to then win by 50-60. Like, I think you would get to the end of the autumn and be questioning what progress you've really made there, apart from building a bit of depth. So not great. Kind of important for Scotland. Charlie, that's everything. I've got nothing left. I've got nothing left apart from start my car and race over to the Lensbury to see the All Blacks trade.
I was going to say, nothing left apart from to start your working day, mate.
Start my working day.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, because this isn't work. This is a joy, mate. Listeners, viewers, your support over the last few weeks has been unbelievable. Like our subscription numbers on YouTube in particular are rocketing, and we really appreciate it because we're slowly getting the word out and reaching to more people on there through the algorithm. So thank you. Please keep it going. We'll be in the stands, Charlie, doing a bit of reaction, I imagine, on Saturday evening as well, just to kind of recap whatever's happened. But yeah, thank you, mate.